Silvercrow.
Welcome to the Urban Witch Podcast, where modern magic meets ancient wisdom. Join us today as we'll be discussing the differences and similarities between witchcraft and spirituality and seeing how the two can coexist together. When we're looking at witchcraft practices and how the sort of spiritual nature of witchcraft practices, many people will often see some similarities between other spiritual practices. Spirituality in the modern day is really popular. There's countless groups and courses and books and content online talking about spiritual practices and spirituality as a whole. And really the term sort of spirituality encompasses quite a lot of different practices, everything from sort of Buddhism and Taoism all the way to sort of nature-based practices and everything in between. People will be there's a lot of groups to do with crystal healing and crystal spiritual practices and practices to do with meditations and creative visualizations and all of those things. And so all of that kind of comes under the umbrella of spirituality. And even within religions, the religious practices themselves are essentially spiritual in that sense. But spirituality in a modern day context has kind of become like this umbrella term for anything that is that is seeking to enlighten the soul or awaken the senses or help us ascend. There's always this kind of concept of kind of ascension, help the spirit ascend or vibrate on a higher frequency. All of these terms you would have heard, lots of times online, and they are very of the spirituality practice, the spirituality culture in that sense. In terms of how they are similar or different to witchcraft, there are lots of similarities within spirituality and within witchcraft, mostly because the practices that we tend to have within witchcraft tend to be quite old. Even though modern witchcraft practices, and particularly sort of Wiccan witchcraft, is relatively new. That was sort of only 1930s, 1950s and onward. So that's kind of the Wiccan sort of practices is what we would regard as kind of New Age. And spirituality in the modern sense is also a New Age practice. Yes, they do borrow, it does borrow sort of some older belief systems and some older ways of practice, likewise as does Wicca. But essentially the core of those belief systems are both what we would class as New Age. Spirituality and witchcraft practices together there are lots of differences, but there also are lots of similarities. And really the similarities are often quite nuanced and not that easy to pick apart. Really, there are lots of shared practices and shared belief systems and rituals. And so I guess the point of this podcast today is we're going to kind of explore some of those a little bit and see how they differ, how they are similar, and whether the two fit together. Whether witchcraft practice and spirituality fit together, or whether they are kind of closely connected. And so really a lot of the spirituality sort of practices that you would see today, things like the meditations and crystal healing, gong baths and sound resonance, clearance or healing, and all of those things. Those types of practices have been used in a magical sense across cultures for thousands of years. Some of them, things like the use of sound to heal and to cleanse or clear a space. or for a spiritual purpose have been used for thousands of years. And from right through sort of Middle Eastern and Eastern cultures all the way through to Europe and our sort of Western cultures, you know, African cultures, all cultures pretty much have used sound as a clearance and as an energy transference vehicle, I guess, for thousands of years. And so those types of practices are very, I guess, they're paganistic in the sense that, you know, all cultures at all points of time have used sound in a similar way. So the spirituality side, the use of that now is kind of borrowed from those pagan cultures from, you know, ancient times. And likewise, you know, witchcraft, and particularly older witchcraft, Wiccan witchcraft now is very sort of, you know, yes, a lot of Wiccan witchcraft is very, they do borrow a lot of that sort of old stuff, but which magical practice from ancient times has also used sound, you know, whether that's chants or humming or bells. Bells are quite a popular one, you know, the resonance that you get from various different kinds of bells. It could be sort of the roars and shouts that have been used across the board for thousands of years. You know, there are numerous cultures that would be classed as pagan, I guess, ancient pagan cultures who use the voice in spiritual ways. You know, sort of the Mongolian throat singing is a good example of that, and Native American chants that they would do. So there's lots of ways of using the voice, using resonance and sound that you know go across the board. They fit comfortably within both spirituality and with witchcraft practices. And there's also the whole thing with crystal healing. So crystals have been used for a long time for their energy output, for their utilization of energy and vibration, and the energy that they give off. And again, you know, that's a common practice within spirituality. The whole thing with crystals is quite a common practice. And again, it's similar in witchcraft. You know, there's a lot of similar practices when it comes to all of those kinds of the natural tools and natural elements. I think across the board, there's lots of crossovers and lots of similarities. I think a big one really is the idea and the concept of manifesting. You know, in spirituality, manifesting is a kind of core tenet of the spirituality belief system, and also, you know, the connection with the universe or source or higher powers, whatever you want to label that. You know, there is that similar belief system with sort of a lot of older pagan beliefs that there'll be they'll direct that more to sort of various gods and goddesses. Modern Wicca similarly does that too. Some witchcraft practice don't use, you know, mine's one of them. You know, I don't utilize gods and goddesses. I don't worship gods or goddesses. My only sort of guiding force, I guess, is the universal force and the natural elements. You know, the natural cycles. Nature in general is kind of the force that I would use as guiding force. And I would refer to it as, I guess, the universal energies, you know, in that sense. So I don't believe in gods and goddesses. I see gods and goddesses as kind of more of an archetypal thing where we can utilize the sort of mythological and folkloric teachings of gods and goddesses, and we can sort of see traits of ourselves within those descriptions of the gods and goddesses. So we can kind of use them in that way. For me, nature is the guiding force. And for a lot of spirituality practices, nature is also a big part of that practice. You know, grounding, meditations, being out in natural spaces is a big part of that is a big part of that spiritual connection to the universe, to the universal forces. And so there are those similarities. With manifesting, in spirituality, manifesting is kind of the like a core to it, I guess. And manifesting is all about sort of willing into existence the thing that you want, the situation, the physical object, people, or circumstances that you want in your life. And there's lots of various different techniques and spirituality teachings online and in books and so on around this whole, the manifesting of the thing that you want, the way of life that you want, perhaps. There's an old book from I think it was from like the 60s or 70s called The Secret, and that talks about this kind of spirituality concept of manifesting the things that you want, the way of life that you want, the money that you want, the happiness that you want, and all of those things. And they are quite a major concept within spirituality. For witchcraft practices, we also have similar concepts. A lot of the spirituality sort of concepts are drawn from these older sort of practices. And within magic is ancient. Magic's been around since the dawn of time, since early humans sort of started to learn how to use tools. They've worked in a created in a sense of magic, in a world of magic. They've lived in a world of magic. Magic has been all around them, and how they've understood the world has been through the lens of magic. So magic's something that's ancient, and it's been around a long, long time. And then some of these other sort of more recent practices has kind of borrowed bits and pieces. The difference really between witchcraft and spirituality as far as the manifesting goes is witchcraft practices tend to use spells, and spells are, I guess, a form of manifesting. The difference between manifesting and spellcraft is manifesting is kind of you can speak it into existence, will it into existence, meditate on it, and have the conscious awareness that you want this particular way of life or existence or joy or abundance or whatever it is that you want. The difference with magic is that particularly within witchcraft is that you create spells, and the spells kind of give you they're an active form of manifestation, rather than sort of prayer in religion. Prayer in any sort of religion, worship and prayer are forms of kind of passive manifestation. You kind of pray to a god or goddess, you put it out there, and you wait for the god or goddess to respond and give you the thing that you want, or at least that's the thought. Whereas spellcraft is kind of an active form of manifesting. And because the point of spellcraft is that you are utilizing tools, words, writing, or other creative processes, as well as thought and intention and will, but also utilizing other creative processes to sort of reinforce the manifesting that you're trying to put out there. So, for instance, in spirituality, you might meditate or do a particular practice where you are sort of willing into existence, speaking into existence, writing a journal, maybe whatever it may be, is you're willing into existence the thing that you want, whether that's abundance or joy or love or whatever the thing is. Within magic and spellcraft, you add an extra layer to that. So instead of just speaking into existence or willing it through thought alone, what we're doing is we're adding an actionable approach to that. So if we wanted to have say we wanted to do some practice or manifest some kind of abundance, manifest a new job or car or some money or whatever it was that you want to manifest. The whole thing with magic is that you add an actionable layer. So you would have physical tools. You may burn there would be some form of kind of burning, or there would be sort of a releasing of energy through a physical means, whether that's burning, whether it's something to do with sort of incense, or whether it's tying something or cutting cords, whatever it is, there will be a physical action. And the idea is that you're creating this physical action as a way, it kind of like a psychosomatic way. So it ties the mind and the body together. The physical action, the physical nature of creating something or of transforming something through a physical action is a really powerful way of shifting the mind. And because technically the mind doesn't really know the difference between imagination and reality. You know, the mind's being tricked all the time. We're being tricked and bombarded by all kinds of external stimulus, you know, colors and branding and messaging through marketing and things like that. So we're being sort of programmed all the time in that way. So it's the same way, you know, the physical action that you use within spellcraft and within magic are designed to sort of connect the mind and the body together. Because then it becomes more enforceable. You're taking action, you're taking ownership of that thing that you want to achieve. And so you're taking it away from just relying on spirit or gods or the universe in that way. You're taking ownership of that, and you're saying, right, I'm going to create this physical action, and that's going to solidify the thoughts in my mind, and then I'm going to release them out, and then the universe will take care of the rest. So you kind of meeting the universal energies halfway there, I guess, in that way. And similarly with you know, affirmations, spirituality has a lot of there's a lot of talk with affirmations, and there'll be sort of speaking affirmations, reading affirmations, writing affirmations, and affirmations are just essentially sort of positive words that you sort of tell yourself that will benefit you in some way. And again, it's that whole thing of kind of creating a thought process in your head that shifts how you think and how you feel. It's sort of the psychosomatics again. With witchcraft, affirmations tend to be there tends to be a weight behind the affirmations. You know, within witchcraft, a lot of witches will say our word is our wand. And so the words that we speak hold not just the meaning of the words that we speak, but they also hold a resonance through the sound of the words that we speak, and also within the meaning, and also the emotion behind the words that we speak. And a lot of witchcraft practice also put emphasis on the breath behind the words that they speak. So the breath that carries the words outward from us is equally as important as the words themselves. And so affirmations in terms of witchcraft practice, they can come in sort of chants or invocations and incantations, I guess. We often sort of add rhyme or musicality to it some way. Sometimes it's kind of like a melody. I can't even get my words out today. A melody behind it too. So we could sing the words, we could hum the words, we could sort of put a rhyme or a rhythm behind the words. And a lot of witches tend to do that. There tends to be this kind of rhyming notion behind things like affirmations that would be called as affirmations within spirituality. There tends to be rhymes and incantations and invocations and chants within witchcraft. And the idea being is that you're placing your energy behind it and projecting your will outwards via these words. A lot of spirituality is kind of based around the inner self. And it's kind of like the sort of looking inward, and you know, likewise witchcraft practice also look inward. We do sort of shadow work and stuff that is based around that sort of inward look. But a lot of witchcraft practice really is about the outward. You know, it's the transformation of from our own will, our own free will, that we project outwards to affect change in our environment or the environment of others. So you can kind of see some of the similarities, some of the differences. There are lots and lots of crossovers for sure, and they do sit alongside each other relatively well. I think with the only difference really with the whole spirituality and the witchcraft side of things is witchcraft kind of gives it a bit more of I guess you could you could say there's a bit more oomph behind witchcraft because you have that tangibility. There's a tangibility with witchcraft that you don't necessarily have with spirituality. I think spirituality, there's lots of great practices and rituals within spirituality for sure. Meditations and things like that are great practices to have anyway. And grounding and all of those things are really great practices to have, breath work, so on and so on. All of those types of practices are really great to have. I think with witchcraft, what tends to happen is there's perhaps a backing of those practices, of some of those similar practices, by a tangibility, by a tangible doing of some kind of action that backs those things up, is behind those things. And so it's a really great way of tying the two together. And, there's a lot of fear, I guess, from spirituality when it comes to witchcraft, because witchcraft is the term witchcraft. It's kind of a loaded term, right? There's a lot of baggage that goes with that term. And so spirituality tends to be seen as kind of like this lightning. It's the light, there's terms like love and light and things like that are within the spirituality sort of circles. And really, there tends to be this connotation of lightness, whereas witchcraft tends to have this very connotation of darkness all the time. There's pros and cons to both of those things. The cons for witchcraft is that it becomes a bit like it's a problem for us at times. We struggle with this whole negative notion that we have around witchcraft practice. But on the flip side of that, the spirituality, love and light thing tends to be a bit of spiritual bypassing. They complete a lot of spirituality. A lot of people in the spirituality community seem to bypass the notion that we are all dark as well inside. We all have our darkness. We all have our inner qualities that we like to keep hidden from others. We don't like to show exactly who we are all the time, because we have thoughts and negative thoughts and ill intentions at times for others. It's just the nature of humanity. We are wild at nature, really. We are natural beings, and we are connected to all other natural beings, and those natural beings all have, there's no good or evil. We all have individual wills and intentions and thoughts and feelings, and as such, we are paradoxical in that sense. None of us are truly good, none of us are truly evil. We are somewhere in between, and it fluctuates all the time. So I think that's probably the best way of kind of saying, sort of exploring the differences and similarities between spirituality and between witchcraft practices, and you can kind of see how the two coexist and work together in a fashion. And really, there are huge amounts of spiritual practices within witchcraft practice. It forms the basis of the way of life, that that we live. And things like grounding and connection to nature are hugely important to witches, just as they are to a lot of the people in the spirituality community. So there's huge amounts of differences, huge amounts of similarities, but all in all, the intentions most of the time are very similar. We all want to have this. I guess it's about having some form of control over our world, our lives. Or even if it's an illusion of control, we gain the control that we want over our lives. So I hope that kind of explains it enough for you, and you can kind of see, whichever side of the fence you sit on, you can kind of see the differences and the similarities between the two. And I think the two don't need to be disregarded in whichever shape or form. There are benefits, there are pros and cons, and negative things for both sides, for witchcraft practice and for spirituality. And so the two work perfectly well side by side together. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Witch Podcast. Please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. check all the other videos that we've done so far, and you know, give us a comment, give us some feedback, get in touch, and also visit our brilliant site, silvercrow.uk. Stay wise, stay wild, and keep the magic alive. Till next time.